everybody, I am Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is Day, Equinox Musings, Debunking Fake Religion and Pseudoscience, subtitle Atomism and Atomism. And happy Equinox, everybody. We are now in the springtime, and the equinox, of course, is when the day and the night are equal, and then it heralds the entrance of the spring, when the sun and the daylight overcomes the night in terms of its length of the day. And over to the 21st on Sunday was technically the equinox. We had a nice little event at our house, a nice equinox drum circle, and there we had a bunch of friends over, and they brought drums and whatnot. And the intro to this topic essentially is we asked somebody to borrow a drum, a friend of ours, not so much a friend of mine, but a friend of Space Panthers and another mom friend, and she was kind of hesitant to let us borrow the drum, because apparently she considers herself to be a Christian, and what she said essentially is that I've looked into the history of drum circles, and it's very much entwined with earth worship and paganism, and I'm a little uncomfortable about this drum being used in a drum circle of such sort, an equinox drum circle, because I'm a Christian, and this is a drum that I used to use in church for church drum circles. And basically it set off this whole conversation between myself and Space Panther, where it's so silly to me. First of all, the drum was broken, right? When they actually took it out, it was torn, on the actual fitting on the top. And the other thing is that this is a person who considers themselves to be a Christian, but is twice divorced for ultimately what I consider to be immaterial causes. There's good reasons to separate, there's good reasons to divorce, domestic violence, adultery, breaking that faith. But ultimately, from what I understand of the stories, that neither of the divorces were for good reason, and especially the more recent one. I feel for the guy who she left. He's still our neighbor, and he's a nice guy, and he's not super intelligent, but he's a very nice guy, and appears to be very moral and ethical, but apparently she just didn't like him anymore, so she broke a sacred bond of marriage, and basically decided to become, because she was more enamored with being a single mom, and working in the workforce, and she's very enamored of the feminist ideal of working in the workforce. And now she actually is coming to terms with the reality of working, 40 hours a week, and putting her kids in daycare, and all, the financial expenses of, living in a single income household versus a dual income household. And basically all of this is just kind of an intro to, it's just funny to me, the fake religion of what most people consider to be Christianity today. And again, I consider myself to be a Christian. I still read the Bible, before I go to sleep, and I find it to be a very enlightening book. But again, it's like the idea of Christianity as separate from nature and opposed to nature, and that one can't, basically honor the cycles of time and connect it to the seasons and the passing and the natural world, because that takes away from the attention to God, right? God is apparently, in this conception, is a narcissist and an attention whore. And I don't believe in that conception of God. It's basically, she says, you can't basically worship creation because creation is imperfect. We can only worship God. And first of all, I don't think that banging on some drums constitutes, worship of the earth, or worship, it's like our friends set up this, array of crystals and stuff, and, we had kind of like just a sort of honoring and kind of, of the time before we got started, and it was a spiritual event. It is honoring the cycles of time, but all of that, and our friend who set up the crystal, she said something that I thought was good, which is, if you can't see God in everything, you can't see God at all, or if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. And I thought that was valid and valuable. And it's very interesting when people, they worship, an external God, an external reality, but, they can't see how they tie into that. They can't see how everything connects. And this ties into atomism, right? Materialism, which, the child of that is relativity and, quantum mechanics and, right, this new religion of empirical scientism that removes people, again, from that connection. They're almost two sides of the same coin, the fake religion and the pseudoscience. And they'll say that the ether is pseudoscience. They'll say that, all of the things that we're bringing forward as the new and old and true science is basically pseudoscience. But they are the ones who are basically making up whole cloth, just basically mathematical fictions that are detached from any sort of reality. And it's again, Ken Wheeler did a great video yesterday, addressing the people who are attacking him as pseudoscience. And, basically saying, you guys are the ones who explain magnetism by means of such fictions as virtual photons, which don't exist, have never been, as he says, the input or output of any experiment. They're a completely fictional construct, just a mental abstraction that, but they can't explain magnetism. They can't explain action at a distance. The ether is like this crazy idea to them, but they're always talking about, the quantum fluctuations of the vacuum, right? How does a vacuum fluctuate, right? How does nothing move? How does space-time is just empty space, but it bends, right? It has properties even though it's empty. And they say, it's just amazing that they'll call the ether, pseudoscientific, but at the same time, their explanations for things in the lack of the ether are so convoluted and ridiculous that it's just, again, Occam's razor. That which has the fewest assumptions is generally correct, right? The simplest answer is generally correct. Not to say that it always is, but realistically, it's so much easier to conceive of the universe as having a unified field, which is the ether, the underlying substrate or medium for all waves, including light, including, radio waves, microwaves, or the entire electromagnetic spectrum being essentially just, modalities of moving that ether. As, Ken Wheeler says, physics, none of these PhDs can define what a field is, what energy is. But, a field is an ether perturbation modality, right? Light is just the rippling of the ether, the inducing of an electric current through the ether. And it's very, very simple to understand the reality in that. When everything is connected, there is this underlying medium, and everything that we understand in the electromagnetic spectrum, the foundation of our electronic world and the physical world is essentially just movement of the ether. And Ken Wheeler references this video of Richard Feynman, who is kind of like, one of the original high priests of the cult of quantum. And it's like this video on, there's lots of clips of it on YouTube. Richard Feynman explains magnetism, or more appropriately, Richard Feynman tries to explain magnetism. And again, it's this clip of this interviewer. It seems like it's back in like the 70s, and the interviewer asks, when you're holding these magnets and, they have this force between them, what is that? Why does that happen? And Richard Feynman, again, who is held up by people as one of the smartest scientists of the 20th century, his answer is so rambling and incoherent, it blows my mind. I had never seen that clip until this morning. And, Ken Wheeler's referencing this is like, this guy is again, held up as one of the most brilliant people, and again, the architects of the cult of quantum. And his explanation of magnetism is basically a long, rambling version of, it's too complicated, I can't tell you. And he goes into all these analogies of why is ice slippery, but he never actually gives any explanation of magnetism, and essentially, says, it's too complicated. There's too many things happening for me to explain it to you. But really, he's just basically covering his ass of the fact that he doesn't actually understand. And there's no actual coherent understanding or explanation of such simple and basic things as magnetism. Nor is there a coherent or simple explanation of things like light, which is why they defer to inherent contradictions like a wave-particle duality, right? Sometimes it behaves like a wave, sometimes it behaves like a particle. And so it's a wave-particle duality, so we don't know what it is. Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that, which is a stupid answer. It's a completely stupid answer. And even the people who are bringing forward, supposed new physics, like Nassim Haramein, who I actually, some of his work I really appreciate, and, I used to be kind of more of a fan of his, but I follow him on Facebook, and he posted this video, and he's got this Resonance Academy, and talking about essentially, sacred geometry and the structure of quantum physics. And basically he did this video where he's talking about the vacuum, right? And he's going off of essentially a lot of the conventions of the standard model, but trying to explain basically the ether. And he's talking about how the vacuum is creating matter, and the vacuum has this basically collapsing aspect into a point, a singularity, and that creates matter. And it's just, again, he's really trying to unify all of the physics and bring it back together, but it's still rambling and incoherent because it's using the presuppositions of the standard model, right? A vacuum cannot fluctuate. A vacuum cannot bend. There is no such thing as space-time. There's no such thing as time either. Time is a relative description of motion and magnitude. There is no actual substance of time. And again, when the supposed Einstein's clocks, right, the cesium clocks that register differences when sending around the Earth in different directions, that's not because the fabric of time itself has changed. It's because the medium through which the clocks were moving, they were going through different densities of the medium, and it registered basically the same thing as the Sagnac effect of basically a difference in light speed in a rotating system. That basically light is not constant for all observers. It definitely is not. The people who are arguing on my previous ether physics video say, well, Sagnac doesn't violate relativity because a rotating frame isn't an inertial frame. And, light is only constant in all light is only constant in all inertial reference frames, and a rotating system is a non-inertial reference frame. So there, we put an asterisk next to it. So you didn't disprove relativity because a rotating system isn't, is not an inertial reference frame. But here's the thing: if rotating systems don't constitute inertial reference frames, and inertial reference frames are the only, frames in which light speed is always constant, everything in the universe is a rotating frame, right? The Earth is rotating itself, right? The Earth is rotating around the sun, right? The sun is rotating around the galaxy. The galaxy itself is probably rotating in a galaxy cluster. Everything is just spirals within spirals within spirals. And so if the entire universe is a non-inertial reference frame, and light speed is only constant for all observers in inertial reference frames, well, then light speed is never constant, and thus relativity is a completely absurd supposition. Why would we, basically the commenter was like, well, that's saying because, there's no such thing as a perfect circle, that geometry doesn't exist. Well, no, first of all, perfect circles do exist. Ever seen a bubble? And, it's not like, and again, geometry is still valid. It's the relation of numbers and basically shapes, basically going back to Pythagoras. But it's like saying that, everything, we're basing our entire reality off of, the math of perfect circles, and then basically saying everything is a perfect circle. That's what's saying essentially light speed is constant for all observers. It's not, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And the idea that we're holding Einstein on this pedestal and assuming that relativity is correct, no matter how many anomalies and unexpected things we witness in astronomy, is just hilarious to me. It's absolutely hilarious. Again, all these different things, we got to go back to the drawing board. This unexpected star, this unexpected quasar nebula, this unexpected movement in galactic motion, right? They still haven't explained galactic motion, and they defer to things like dark matter and dark energy. and they say that they discovered dark energy and they discovered dark matter because they discovered the need for it in their mathematical model. It's absolutely asinine. They didn't discover anything. They only discovered that their model is inadequate without it. And so again, it's just like the virtual photons. It is completely fallacious. It does not exist. But because they realized that their model doesn't work without it, they say they discovered it. And, I watched this thing on, the YouTube streaming box. It was from, PBS has this new, science series. I don't know how new it is, actually, but I found it recently. It's basically a science, video series called Space Time. And, again, I am usually trying to see if I can disprove my own, tenets and, see if maybe, this worldview that I have is falsifiable. And then maybe I've just, gone off on a wild tangent and maybe conventional science is correct and I'm just out there. But realistically, this video was how time causes gravity. And it was, again, the most rambling and incoherent, stupid nonsense I've ever heard. To hold that relativity is true and to explain all of the different aspects of our reality goes into the most convoluted explanations that, again, are completely detached from reality. And it doesn't make sense to think of time as a physical substance. It's so much easier to say that gravity, as Ken Wheeler says, is non-point source dielectric acceleration, incoherent dielectric acceleration caused by essentially a null point in the tension, the toroidal tension of the Earth. That basically the Earth and its mass and its electrical, essentially, properties of that mass creates essentially the force of gravity. It's the same force as electricity and magnetism. It's just dielectric acceleration toward the null point in the etheric tension, which is at the center of the Earth. And, the sun and all the other planets, it's the same phenomenon. And it's different than, point source magnetism. It's not that it's the magnetic field of the planet that creates gravity, because there are other planets which don't have as strong a magnetic field, but they still have gravity. But the matter itself creates essentially a density in the ether. And so it's the same, again, sort of, rubber sheet, visualization, but the difference is space-time is nothing. It doesn't exist. It has no substance, whereas the ether is actually a substance. It is a medium, and it is filled with potential, and all of our forms of electricity generation is just the churning of the ether, right? A generator is the churning of the ether. It's just basically magnets rotating and creating disturbances, perturbations in the ether, and that causes the induction of charge, which we abstractify as the electron, but realistically that's just a concept. These are not particles. There's no photon. It's just induction of current through the ether. And the entire world of quantum is based off of the conception of the photon. So if we don't understand light, and the photon is an absurd abstraction, then basically all of the cult of quantum and all the magic bumping particles, in their conception of reality are all similarly fallacious. And all of these things can be described as perturbations of the ether. There's no quantum foam or quantum vacuum that is fluctuating. It's just the ether that is being churned up and perturbed, and this creates the entire spectrum of electromagnetic modalities. And again, it's to give people the illusion of a false truth, right, that doesn't actually explain something. It's the same thing with the fake religion and the fake science. When you say this is the truth, whether it be the Atomistic monotheism where only God can be worshipped and nothing else matters, right, and the earth itself is a form of Satan, and honoring basically the passage of the seasons is basically a satanic endeavor. It's again, when people realize that false truth doesn't actually give them the meaning and the explanation that they're looking for, then they rebel against it, and then they're in a basically nihilist state, a morally relativist state. Moral relativity and scientific relativity, are basically cut from the same cloth. And again, it was a Jesuit priest who came up with the conception of the Big Bang and the expanding universe, Georges Lemaitre. And it's ultimately the empirical scientism and the false Church of Rome, right? It's the same power structure that's holding people in a state of stunted development, of retardation in a very real and literal sense. That when we don't have access to the true model of the universe, then it basically prevents us from reaching our full potential. It keeps us in a state where we can be easily governed. And again, it's the unlocking of the human ability and the human potential, which is very, very spiritual, is very much tied into our access of free energy, right? Of everything as a microcosm within a macrocosm. What, the conception of man in the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance man was a microcosm within a living, breathing macrocosm. But empirical scientism has taken us out of that. And, all of these different, aspects of progressive ideology have taken the conception of man as basically, yes, a living part of a living universe, and thrown it into this complete, disarray and meaningless conception of the universe. And it all moves toward the complete disobjectification, the removal of subjectivity itself and objectivity, along with it, to the point of transhumanism. Of basically, we are no different than artificial intelligence, and so when we actually come to merging, our bodies with robots, it's going to be part and parcel of this worldview that doesn't believe that there is any meaning to consciousness, that there is no God, that there is no organizing structure to the universe. And ultimately, the best thing we can do is just to give up, a sovereignty to our AI overlord masters. But it is destined to fail, right? At the same time that the Leviathan, the deep state, and all of its actors are pushing for this kind of takeover and a great reset, people are waking up on a big, big scale. And the fact that we, again, now have people, I'm not a physicist, I'm not, in quantum nuclear engineer, but I can understand the basically etheric conception of the universe. I can explain, for the most part, everything in this physical universe, and my conception and place within it. But ultimately, Richard Feynman can't explain basic things like magnetism, right? And even today, again, these people will call us crazy and pseudoscientific, and they'll say that we don't know what we're talking about, when in reality everything that they're saying relies on imaginary constructs and made up virtual photons and dark matter and dark energy. But again, as I've been saying, there's a unifying, coherent flow of all matter and energy in the universe. It is bound into the ether, and that is the mind of God, the will of God. Everything happens as a result of cause and effect, which is intractably bound up in choice. And it's interesting, the hidden riddles within the English language. The ether is very similar to the word ether, right? So AETHER, the ether, as in the luminiferous ether, is similar to either, EITHER, right? Implying a choice, either this or that. And a choice, again, is fundamentally the basis of causality. To understand, again, the word ether is to imply choice and causality. That it is consciousness and the willing of things into existence by means of choice that starts this chain reaction of causality, that one thing is bound into the next. We do not have a random universe. We do not have a meaningless universe. We have such an infinitely complex universe that is also so simple, again, simplex, that it appears to be random. It is a system so sophisticated and magnanimous that it appears to be random to the observer, but realistically everything is bound up in choice. Everything is bound up in the causality linked to choice. And that's a very empowering view of the universe. And again, it leads to, the ether physics is the basis of Nikola Tesla, John Clerk Maxwell, Oliver Heaviside, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, right? The people who gave us our electrified world were all operating from a basis of ether physics. And then we have the cult of Einstein, which is based not in any wisdom or actual intelligence. They have a whole bunch of math, some of which is valid, some of which is just going off into Wonderland. But math doesn't explain things. Math only basically describes the relation of things. But math can be very useful when it's tied to reality. But if we don't have a worldview, a philosophical worldview in which that has sort of some anchor point and structure and meaning, then it's all just leading us off again into Wonderland. And it's the imposter, the imitation of an explanation, but really it's just mathematical gibberish. And again, the explanation of time dilation is completely nonsensical. Everything about they ultimately get so complex, and then they'll attack you for not understanding it, when in reality it's just that it doesn't make sense because it's false, it's fake. It's the same thing why God would be upset that people are playing bongos on the Equinox, right? God he doesn't care about people breaking a sacred bond of marriage and for no apparent reason, but he's mad that you want to honor the calendar that he himself created, right? It's like, it just doesn't make any sense. And I am not willing to say, oh, it doesn't make sense because it must be true and I'm wrong. No, it doesn't make sense because it is wrong, right? Nature and the universe is obligated to make sense, because if it doesn't, it's not to say that if I don't understand it, it must be fake, but that at a certain point, if it doesn't align with the totality of experience and wisdom, then it's relying on way too many assumptions, and it's not based in reality. It must be fake. So whether it be atomism or atonism, it's important to recognize that we have an important part to play in this universe, and it's a very exciting time to see the overthrow of the old regime, and let's keep it rolling. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.
Ah.